Hi, I'm Oscarito, and this is the movie Joker Folie Deux. A mentally unstable clown is serving time in prison for murder. His lawyer wants to declare him insane to transfer him to a mental institution, but he becomes a symbol of resistance for the townspeople. The film, created with the intent to cash in on the success of its predecessor, begins with an animated sequence in the style of Merry Melodies. The cartoon depicts comedian Arthur Fleck's visit to Yuri Franklin's show, which ended in the host's murder and the clown's arrest. The story shifts to a prison for the mentally unstable, where Arthur serves his sentence under the supervision of guard Jackie and his subordinates. Since the patient enjoys telling everyone that he fights a billionaire in a bat costume at night and used to moonlight as a Roman emperor, he is heavily medicated to maintain some level of sanity. Arthur is then led through the rain to another wing for a meeting with his lawyer, Marion Stewart. Along the way, he notices a young woman in group therapy who signals that she is aware of his feat on the talk show. The lawyer proposes a new strategy: pretend to be insane so he can be declared mentally unfit and transferred to a psychiatric hospital. To achieve this, she arranges a session with a psychotherapist, recorded on camera. The doctor, through leading questions, tries to paint the picture of a patient who has completely lost his mind. Then Arthur asks a guard for a cigarette, and they tell him that a movie has already been made about his crime. Some guy named Juan Phoenix played him. Soon, for good behavior, Arthur is allowed to participate in group music therapy. There, he once again meets a girl named Lee. She admits to being a huge fan of his and says she's watched the movie about him at least 20 times. According to Lee, she lives in the same neighborhood as him, her father died in a car accident, and she ended up in the asylum for setting her mother's house on fire. Back in his block, Arthur sees a news report about himself on TV. Prosecutor Harvey Dent is pushing for the death penalty. As an uncontrollable fit of laughter overtakes him, the guards drag him outside to cool off in the pouring rain. Later, the quieter patients are taken to a film screening, where Arthur sits next to Lee. She suggests they escape together and, under the guise of stepping out for a smoke break, sets a fire. As the guards scramble to evacuate the patients, the couple passionately kisses against the backdrop of roaring flames. Then, disguising their escape as a musical number, they dance their way toward the gates, where a crowd of onlookers and reporters has already gathered. However, the guards quickly notice the attempted early release and capture the escapees. As punishment, Arthur is thrown into solitary confinement, where he dreams of another performance on stage alongside Lee. He is awakened from his fantasy by her voice. She bribed a guard to sneak in and see him. She tells him that she's being released, supposedly due to his corrupting influence. Arthur tries to pressure her to stay, but Lee promises to attend every hearing for his case. She also brings makeup to paint his Joker face, and their meeting soon turns into an intimate encounter. Sometime later, his lawyer arranges an interview to show the public that Arthur Fleck is a broken, sick man, not the Joker, the psychotic murderer. During the interview, Arthur learns that Lee's real name is Harley Quinn, and that she has already given several interviews about their relationship. Fleck nearly loses control when a journalist tries to provoke him with uncomfortable questions, but he pulls himself together, convincing himself that he's a changed man now. He has a girlfriend. Right then and there, Arthur performs a serenade for Lee, and for once, his singing is real, not just another hallucination. Lee watches the broadcast from the street, then smashes a store window and steals a television. Soon, the day of Arthur Fleck's first hearing arrives. He is brought into the courtroom, where a crowd of Joker's supporters has gathered, eager to catch a glimpse of their idol. While the prosecutor questions the psychiatrist who evaluated Fleck, Lee enters the courtroom late, humming to herself. The moment Arthur sees her, he smiles and loses all interest in the trial that will decide his fate. His lawyer questions how the psychiatrist could conclude, after only 90 minutes, that her client shows no severe symptoms, despite his traumatic childhood filled with abuse. The defense argues that it was during this time that the boy created an alternate personality, one that first emerged in the subway when he was attacked by drunken thugs. Only back then he was still someone else. After the first hearing, a confrontation erupts between the lawyer and Lee. Lee accuses the attorney of mistreating Arthur. Later, Marion tells her client that his girlfriend has been lying to him. Fleck is stunned to learn the truth. Her father is alive. She grew up in a wealthy neighborhood, studied psychiatry, and voluntarily admitted herself to the clinic. Her arson story was a lie. Shocked by this revelation, Arthur envisions a new performance with Lee, reflecting his fears and doubts, culminating in her pointing a gun at him. When Lee visits him in prison, he directly asks why she lied. She admits that she simply wanted to meet him, and this was the only way. Writing letters wouldn't have had the same impact. She also reveals that she moved into his old apartment to be there when he was released and claims to be pregnant with his child. The two reconcile and joyfully sing together. At the next hearing, Arthur's former neighbor, Sophie, testifies. She recounts how, when Arthur barged into her home, confusing fantasy with reality, she didn't call the police because his mother assured her he was harmless. However, after his crimes, Sophie regrets her decision. Joker's supporters now harass her, blaming her for his imprisonment. The prosecutor asks how Arthur's mother described him. According to Sophie, she called his laughter disgusting and viewed him as a lifelong failure. This triggers painful memories for Arthur, pushing him into yet another elaborate hallucination, a musical number where he violently beats the prosecutor and judge to death before turning a gun on himself. Frustrated with how the trial is unfolding, Arthur fires his lawyer and abandons her split personality defense. He declares that he will represent himself. His supporters erupt in cheers. While awaiting transport back to prison, Lee visits to offer moral support. Upon returning to his cell block, Arthur finds that the inmates, having watched his trial, now see him as a hero. He climbs onto a table to inspire them, and a young prisoner named Ricky joins him, but the guards quickly crack down. Reinforcements arrive and they brutally restore order. At the next hearing, Arthur appears as the Joker, wearing his signature red suit and clown makeup. The judge, citing precedent, allows it but warns that the courtroom is not a stage. The first witness is Gary Pauls, Arthur's former colleague in the clown business, whom he once spared. The prosecutor questions him about the murders, then Arthur takes over. In an impassioned speech, he points out that while his colleagues claim to be his friends, no one truly knew Arthur. But everyone knows who Joker is now. He's no longer a pathetic nobody. He's a famous, respected figure. Even the prison guards treat him with deference. When Arthur finishes, Gary tearfully admits that Arthur was the only one who never mocked his height. Joker, uninterested in sentimentality, coldly replies that he has no further questions. The judge moves to the next witness, but the prosecutor announces he is done. Arthur mockingly repeats his words, imitating Looney Tunes to the delight of his supporters. The judge adjourns the trial until the next morning. Feeling triumphant, Arthur embraces Lee and envisions another elaborate musical number, a grand wedding with an orchestra and piano under bright stage lights. But back in prison, he receives a far less glamorous reception. The guards, still resentful over his televised insults, beat him, drag him to the showers, and subject him to brutal humiliation, calling it discipline. Broken and demoralized, Arthur is returned to his cell, where Ricky notices his state. The young follower begins chanting in his support, but this only provokes the guards further. They drag Ricky away and, in an effort to silence him, strangle him to death. The next day, without saying a word, Lee applies Joker-style makeup to her face before heading to the final trial. Standing before the jury, Arthur, dressed in full costume and makeup, takes the microphone and sits on a stool, mimicking a stand-up comedian's performance. However, his speech contains no jokes. He declares that he has no mental disorder, just as there is no Joker. He committed all his crimes himself and is ready to accept fair punishment. Upon hearing him publicly renounce the idea of being the Joker, Lee silently stands up and leaves the courtroom. While the jury deliberates, Arthur calls her home, but she doesn't answer. The jury finds him guilty. As the sentence is being read, Arthur begins to laugh uncontrollably, provoking the families of his victims into a fight. Security rushes in to break it up. At that moment, an explosion is heard outside. The blast tears through the wall, injuring many, and prosecutor Harvey Dent is left with scars on half of his face. Regaining consciousness, Arthur wanders among the wounded in the ruined building before escaping through the hole in the wall. His followers rush in, shove him into a car, and speed away before the police and firefighters arrive. Dazed, Arthur slowly comes to his senses during the ride. When the car gets stuck in traffic, he seizes the moment, steps out, and runs away from his adoring supporters, some of whom are struck down by the police. As night falls, Arthur goes to his old apartment building where Lee still lives. He finds her standing midway up a long staircase and joyfully begins climbing towards her. But she tells him she can't stay. He broke her heart by rejecting his role as the Joker. She also admits she lied about being pregnant and starts to sing. For the first time since they met, Arthur doesn't join in. He refuses to lose himself in fantasies again. As Lee walks away, the police arrive for him. Arthur is returned to prison, where he is left completely alone. One day, a visitor arrives. A man walks past Arthur without a word, but on his way out, another inmate stops him. The inmate says he wants to tell a joke about a psychopath who walks into a bar and sees his favorite clown. The psychopath wants to buy him a drink, but not the kind he expects. With those words, the inmate pulls out a shiv and stabs Arthur. As life drains from his body, Arthur envisions himself on stage with Lee one last time. He tries to sing his final note while convulsing on the prison floor. Meanwhile, in the background, his killer slowly brings the shiv to his own face, carving a wide, bloody smile, implying that the Joker's legacy will live on. The film ends.